There is a pain that no one sees, a pain that you have learned to hide even from God. Rumi wrote, "Even your pain is a prayer." Have you ever felt like you were carrying an invisible weight? As if something inside you was screaming, but no one was listening? As if everyone saw you smiling, functioning, surviving, but inside, there is a silence that consumes you. There is a soul that has already screamed so much that now it just keeps quiet. This video is for you, who learned to save everything. You who became an expert at saying it's okay, even when your soul is bleeding in silence. Because the spiritual truth that few have the courage to say is, not all silence is peace. Sometimes silence is the hiding place for the deepest pain. It's where the unspoken words live, the muffled screams, the archived traumas, and the cruelest thing. It's just that many people think that this silence makes you strong, but only you know how much it eats away at you inside. This video is not just an explanation, it's a mirror, a sacred space for you to finally hear yourself, not with the ears, but with the soul, because they exist silent hearts who are begging for healing, hearts that have become accustomed to keeping quiet so as not to disturb, hearts that confuse silence with merit, as if talking about pain was weakness, as if feeling was wrong, as if demonstrating were a sign of failure. But what if I told you that what you hide, is this precisely what needs to be seen with love? What if what you keep silent is exactly what is blocking your healing? Rumi said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." But most of us have spent our lives trying to hide the wound, with smiles, with force, with survival. But the soul doesn't want to survive. The soul wants wake up, and waking up sometimes hurts, because you're going to have to look at everything you kept quiet about. You will have to face the voids. You'll have to let the silence speak, but the beauty is there, because when silence speaks, he doesn't scream, he reveals. It reveals what you have lost, what you hid, and what still needs to be embraced with truth. You feel it, don't you? That silent call that beats inside the chest. This feeling that no one really understands you. That no matter how much you explain, no one listens with their soul. It's because what you carry cannot be put into common words. It's spiritual. It is ancestral. It's invisible, but real. Hearts that carry silence are not looking for noise. They are in search of meaning. They want answers that don't come from books. They want rest for the soul. They want permission to feel. And in this video, you will understand why silence can be both a prison and a path. You will discover what Rumi revealed about invisible pain, about spiritual emptiness, about this desire to disappear, which is actually your spirit trying to get back home. Because in the end, all your soul wants, it's being listened to, it's being welcomed, it's being freed from the burden of having to be strong all the time. So, if you feel like you carry a silence that no one understands, this video is for you. If you learned to hide everything you feel, but deep down, you know something needs to change, stay here, because what comes next could be the key you've been waiting for, the spiritual key you were not taught, but maybe your soul already knew all along. And if, at any point in this video, you feel something flutter inside your chest, as if something finally makes sense, write in the comments, "My silence also speaks." Yes, write that down, because when you declare, you begin to set free. You don't comment just to engage. You comment to recognize yourself, to give a name to what has always lived hidden. And if you feel that this type of content speaks to your soul, sign up now, quietly, but with intention. This channel is not about videos. It's about your journey, your cure, your awakening. Leave a like if this touched you, because every click is an invisible signal to the universe. I want to keep listening to my soul. Now take a deep breath, because what comes next, it can change the way you look at everything you've kept quiet about until now. Have you ever found yourself in silence, carrying the weight of everything you never said? Not by choice, but because there simply wasn't room. There was no room for his pain. There was no room for his truth. There was no one with trained eyes to see his soul. And then you learned to shut up. He learned to smile while he was falling apart inside. He learned to say he was fine, because every time he tried to say otherwise, he was ignored, silenced, discredited. Maybe you grew up in a home where feeling was a weakness, or maybe you loved someone who only saw what was convenient, someone who only listened when you didn't talk too much, and this silence became a habit, then defense, and finally, identity. Today, you may no longer know what it would be like to live out loud, express what you feel, cry without fear, ask without guilt, shout without being punished. You have become the person everyone admires for being strong, but nobody realizes that it is exhausted inside. It's like your soul is screaming, but no one is listening, not even you, because silence has become so much a part of who you are that even his own ears were turned off. The invisible problem is this: the world applauds your control but doesn't see your pain. And deep down, you just wish someone would say, "I see you. Really, I see everything you carry in silence." But people only hear what you shout with words. They don't understand the codes of the soul. They don't recognize the crying hidden behind the eyes. They don't feel the tremor contained in the forced breathing. You feel like you carry a scream that never found a sound, a cry for help that was stifled until it became insomnia, or anxiety, or that constant feeling that something is wrong, but you don't know exactly what. And do you know what's cruelest about all this? It's just that even within your most intimate relationships, you remain alone, you remain invisible. You may be lying next to someone, and yet feel as distant as a dim star. You may be in a circle of friends, laughing, talking, being you, and at the same time feeling like no one there would know what to do if you collapsed, because you learned that showing too much pushes you away. What to say, what you feel is surprising. Being sincere scares those who don't know how to deal with depth, and then you became this edited version of yourself. Lighter, more fun, easier to digest, but this is expensive, because the soul was not made to be edited. It was made to be felt, to be revealed, to be listened to with eyes closed. Maybe you're listening to this right now, and feeling heavy in your chest. Maybe you're remembering the times you held back your tears to avoid causing trouble, from the messages you didn't send, of the conversations you rehearsed 1,000 times and never had, of the "it's okay" that he said with his voice, while his soul screamed, "Help me." You are not weak for feeling this way. It's not an exaggeration. It's not dramatic. You just learned to protect yourself too early, and for too long. And the silence that was once a shelter, today has become a prison. You want to talk, but you don't know how anymore. She wants to be understood, but she no longer believes that this is possible. But let me tell you something. You are not alone. And what you feel is not madness. It's just the soul trying to be heard after years of forced silence. That's why your chest tightens for no reason. That's why emptiness arrives when everything seems to be right. That's why the smile weighs. Because there's too much stuff stored in there. And no one ever taught you that. You can leave. That you have the right to say, "I can't take it." That you can allow yourself to weaken. That there is strength in vulnerability. And that silence only protects you to a certain extent. After that, it starts to make you sick. You need to listen to yourself. But more than that, you need to allow yourself to be heard. Even if it's here, now, in this video. Even if the only voice that welcomes you is mine. But maybe that's exactly what your soul asked for. A safe space. A mirror where she could see herself without fear. A ray of light piercing the silence. And if any part of this video spoke to what you hide, comment below. I also carry silences. Write this down, not by me, but for you. Because sometimes the first step to being heard, it is having the courage to name what has never been said. You wrote that you also carry silences. And now it's time to understand where this weight you feel in your chest comes from. Because there is a root, a spiritual origin behind what appears to be merely emotional. And maybe what you call tiredness. Is the soul trying to survive being ignored for so long? The truth that no one told you is this: the heart that is silent is the same one that has already screamed too much. But no one listened. No one stayed. Nobody welcomed him. Then he fell silent, not by choice, but by exhaustion. And when the soul gets tired of being ignored, it begins to protect itself with silence. A silence that becomes a shield, then armor, then prison. You're not silent because you want to be. You are silent because one day you learned that speaking was dangerous, because every time you tried to open up, something or someone closed the door in your face, and the heart that gets hurt so many times stops trusting, not just in people, but in yourself. The spiritual root of your silence is not cowardice, it's survival. It's a sensitive soul trying not to be destroyed again. You keep quiet because you don't want to relive the trauma. She doesn't want to be ridiculed. You don't want to feel that feeling of rejection again. And deep down, maybe you too have started to run away from your own light. Because Rumi said, the wound is the place where the light enters you. But what if that wound still hurts so much that you prefer to keep it closed? It's understandable. Because to let the light in, you would have to open yourself up. And opening up for someone who has already been broken is a risk. You are not afraid of the light. You're afraid of what she'll show. Maybe that's why you get involved with shallow people. Stay in small places. Hide behind a superficial version of yourself. Because it's safer, more controllable, more predictable. But deep down, your soul misses the truth. Lack of depth, lack of authenticity, lack of being whole, not half, not a fragment, but whole. And this is the root. Your silence is the protection of a wounded soul that no longer trusts. And every time someone tries to get close, something inside you puts up the shield, automatically, instinctively. Even if you want to give yourself up, even if you desire true intimacy, even if you dream of a place where you can exist without censorship, the wounded soul develops sophisticated defense mechanisms. She learns to smile with her lips and cry with her body. She learns to occupy spaces without being noticed. She becomes invisible, not because she wants to, but because it has protected her for a long time. But the price for this is high. It's the disconnect. It's loneliness even when surrounded by people. It's the constant feeling that no one really sees you. And maybe you don't even see yourself anymore. Because when the soul is silent for too long, she begins to forget her own voice. And that's why you feel this emptiness, this lack of meaning, that absence that accompanies you even in the best moments. It's not that you don't have reasons to smile, it's just that you forgot how to feel. And feeling requires presence. It demands openness. It requires vulnerability. But spirituality is not an escape route, it's a way back. Back to its essence, back to your light, back to the sound of your own soul. And maybe you've never heard it so clearly, but I will tell you now with the delicacy that your pain deserves. You are not wrong for keeping quiet. You did what you could with the tools you had. You survived. And that is sacred enough. But the time has come to understand that this silence that protects you, it's also stopping you from living. There is life after pain. There is light beyond the wound. There is sound after silence. But none of this happens as long as you continue to run away from the source. And the origin is there, saved, locked under lock and key, in a corner of your soul where you haven't visited in years. But that calls you, like a subtle echo amidst the noise of the world. Do you hear that call? Maybe that's why you're here now. Because something inside you recognized every word, not as a novelty, but as a memory. And if you've come this far and felt something inside you move, if a part of you wanted to cry or felt truly understood for the first time, let this be recorded. Write in the comments, "My silence came from pain, but it will not be my end." Because this sentence is more than a comment. It is a spiritual decree. It's a silent permission to start listening to yourself, and to perhaps allow the world to hear you too, for the first time with truth. If you're here even now, it's because something inside you recognizes this pain, this silence that isn't just an absence of sound, but a dense presence, a weight the soul has learned to carry so masterfully that even you've come to believe it's part of who you are. But what if I told you that this silence, this inner exile, isn't the end? That there's a key, a revelation that changes everything, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. What nobody told you is, silence is not weakness. It is a ritual of survival of the soul. You learned to be silent not because you were weak, but because it was the only way to carry on. It was the invisible shield between you and the world you couldn't feel as deeply as you do. The world demanded lightness from you. You offered silence. It asked for stability. You surrendered self-effacement. But inside, your soul screamed, and that scream, stifled for years, became a dull echo. But now, listen carefully. True healing doesn't happen when you speak. It begins when you listen to what you've tried to keep quiet for so long. The key isn't to say everything at once, to vomit accumulated pain, or to try to be understood by someone who's never had the courage to dive into their own waters. The key is to stop and listen, to hear what your soul has been trying to tell you in the silence of the early mornings, in the tears that fall for no reason, in the tightness in your chest that comes from nowhere. Do you feel it? Do you feel that gentle but profound call as if there were something waiting to be heard for years? This isn't imagination. It's your soul. It's still alive. It's still trying to talk to you. It's still willing to show you the way, but only if you silence the world for a moment and listen to it without judgment, without rushing, without trying to fix anything. Just listen. Silence ceases to be a prison the moment you stop using it to hide and start using it to find yourself. The pain that silenced you for so long can also be the pain that teaches you to feel more deeply, with more presence. What seems like weakness today will be wisdom tomorrow. But to do so, you need to change your perspective. You need to move from being a victim of your silence to becoming its guardian. Silence, when embraced consciously, becomes sacred space. It ceases to be an absence of voice and becomes fertile soil where healing flourishes. Maybe no one has told you this before, but it's important that you hear it now. Not all silence is empty. Sometimes silence is the womb where your soul is preparing to be reborn. But this rebirth doesn't happen by force. It requires surrender. It requires listening. It requires presence. The hidden key is there, where you least want to look. It's in that moment, when you feel like you're going to fall apart, but instead of distracting yourself, you allow yourself to feel. It's in the night when, instead of numbing yourself with social media or any other escape, you close your eyes and ask your pain, what do you want to show me? It's not an easy key to use, because it doesn't open external doors, it opens internal portals. And when you open that kind of portal, nothing stays the same. You begin to realize that what hurt most wasn't the lack of words, it was the lack of listening. That what hurt most wasn't not being understood by others, it was not knowing how to embrace yourself, and that changes everything. Silence, then, changes roles. From executioner, it becomes guide. From symptom, it becomes sign. From enemy, it transforms into teacher. And you realize that everything you've always sought, welcome, belonging, understanding, begins to emerge, silently, from within you, effortlessly, without shouting, without begging for attention or validation. You begin to feel peace where before there was only anguish, not because everything has changed outside, but because, for the first time, you truly listen to yourself. And when the soul is heard, it blossoms. But this blossoming is slow, deep, sacred, and it demands a new kind of presence, a presence that's only possible when you stop being distracted by the wounds of others and start tending to your own. When you stop chasing after those who never saw you and start seeing yourself through the eyes you've always sought in others, you no longer need to be strong in the old way. That strength that only survives, that only resists, that only endures. Now it's time to discover a new strength, the strength to feel, the strength to dive deep within yourself, the strength to transform silence into wisdom, pain into light, emptiness into an altar. And maybe, just maybe, your soul is ready for this now, ready to stop running from the light, ready to see the wound as a gateway, not a punishment, ready to listen to what comes from within without fear of breaking, because you already understand. Breaking is not the end, it's the beginning. And if you felt, at any moment, that something inside you was moved by these words, write here in the comments, I'm ready to hear what I kept silent about. He writes as if it were a prayer, as if it were a whisper from the soul that has finally found space to exist. Perhaps you learned as a child not to bother, not to cry, not to ask. Maybe your first silence was born when you tried to say something hurt. Someone said it was drama, or exaggeration, or weakness. Maybe it began when you were hurt and instead of comfort, received indifference, when you needed to be loved but had to settle for being invisible. And then, very slowly, you began to understand. Feeling hurts, talking scares, needing pushes you away, and asking became almost a sin. You grew up this way with an immense but guarded soul. You learned to swallow your tears, to keep quiet when your heart was breaking. You remained silent when you most needed to scream, and this silence became your emotional signature. Everyone sees you as strong, but no one understands that behind this strength lies a soul that just wants to be touched, not with pretty words, not with empty promises, but with presence, with truth, with listening. You learn to give your all, to be a safe haven for others, to carry everyone's burdens except your own. You learn to anticipate other people's emotions, to care, to avoid conflict, and for a time, this gave you identity, to be the one who endures, the one who holds on, the one who doesn't break. But now perhaps you've realized that this comes at a cost, because while you give yourself who takes care of you, while you support others who supports your soul, while you welcome all the silences in the world, who listens to yours, it is at this point that the silent pain begins to scream louder than ever. You begin to feel like you are present but not alive, that is surrounded but deeply alone, that exists but is not seen. And then comes the conflict. You want to be touched, but you don't know how to ask. She wants to be heard, but she doesn't know how to speak anymore. She wants to be welcomed but doesn't know how to surrender. This is the life of someone who had to grow up too soon, of those who had to be strong when they still needed to be taken care of someone who has been silent for so long that he no longer remembers the sound of his own voice. And the worst part is that, over time, you start to convince yourself that this emptiness is normal, start to settle for less. He begins to call love what barely seems like presence. He begins to accept emotional crumbs as if they were banquets. You start living to keep up appearances, even when your soul is already begging for a new beginning. But there is a turning point, a subtle moment when you feel like you can't take it anymore, that he can no longer continue betraying himself in the name of other people's peace, who can no longer pretend that everything is okay. That's where the real comeback movement begins. Not to the old version of yourself, but to who you always were before the silence. Maybe you've been through this, or be living it now. Maybe you're still in that relationship where you need to measure every word, every emotion, every presence, where you love but are not loved, where you listen but are not heard, where you give yourself completely and receive half. Or maybe you've distanced yourself from it all because you've learned to trust only in your silence. But even in isolation, the pain continues, because it's not the world that needs to see you. It's you who needs to see yourself again. And when this movement begins, everything changes. You start listening to yourself with more respect. You begin to realize that there is wisdom behind everything you kept silent about. You begin to get closer to your own soul, like someone who finds an old home again. And in this reunion, there is no need to shout, because for the first time you are willing to listen. The silence remains there, but now with another meaning. He is no longer a prison. It is sacred space. It's a pause to feel. It is presence without charge. It's effortless care. It's your soul being welcomed by yourself. You realize you no longer have to prove yourself. You don't have to be strong all the time anymore. You no longer need to adapt to places where your depth is too much. You just have to allow yourself to be whole, even if it's scary, even if this selects who stays and who goes, even if it leaves you alone for a while, because being alone is very different from being lonely. Being alone with your soul at peace is better than being accompanied and at internal war. You deserve relationships where you don't have to silence your essence, where you can speak without fear, feel without guilt, to be without limits. And if at any point during this story you saw yourself, remember the child who learned not to ask, of the woman who survived in silence, of the soul that still waits to be heard. Then write here in the comments, I am not the silence I learned, I am the soul that wants to blossom. Write to anchor this decision within yourself. Write so that this new voice that is being born inside you doesn't go back to sleep. Write, because sometimes a comment is more than a sentence. It's the first step toward a truer life. And when you begin to allow yourself to hear what you've kept silent, something very quiet, yet profoundly powerful, happens within you. It's subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but you feel it. You feel as if your soul, which has been shrunken for so long, begins to slowly stretch, as if your silence, the very silence that was once pain, now becomes a space where your light can breathe. And in that moment of true listening, a new consciousness is born, a consciousness that changes everything. You begin to realize that it is not silence that defines you. It's not abandonment that shaped you. It's not the pain that paralyzes you. You begin to understand, not just with your mind but with your soul, that you are not the silence you carry. You are the universe it tries to protect. This phrase resonates like a truth that has always been there, but now finds space to manifest itself. Because silence, once seen as a burden, begins to be recognized as carrying something sacred. It wasn't there to punish you. It was there to guard a part of you that wasn't yet ready to blossom. But now, maybe it is. Perhaps now you can realize that every time you remained silent, you were protecting something precious. Your sensitivity, your essence, your soul. It's not weakness, it's survival wisdom. But you no longer need to survive. Now it's time to live. To take a deep breath and acknowledge, your soul did not come to be silent. It came to awaken. And awakening is exactly that. The moment you stop identifying with pain and begin to remember your light. The moment you stop repeating stories of abandonment, rejection, and silence, and begin to write a new narrative, no longer based on what you lacked, but on what emanates from within. A story where your voice is not interrupted, but respected, where your presence is not ignored, but revered, where your vulnerability is not seen as weakness, but as divine strength. This shift in consciousness doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with silence, but a different kind of silence. A silence that doesn't isolate, but liberates. That doesn't sicken, but heals. That doesn't hide you, but reveals you. Because you begin to see yourself through different eyes. With the eyes of someone who forgives themselves. Of someone who embraces their shadows. Of someone who honors their scars as sacred maps of their own journey. And with this new perspective, you begin to realize that you were always enough. That you were always too deep to be understood by shallow minds. That your silence was only misunderstood because the world doesn't know how to hear what isn't noise. But now you no longer need the world to understand you. You just need to understand yourself, and allow yourself to blossom from that understanding. You didn't come here to repeat the cycles of those who came before you. He didn't come to remain silent in the face of what hurts. You didn't come to occupy places that require you to shrink to fit. You came to awaken your own legend. As Rumi said, don't be content with stories of how things happen to others. Awaken your own legend. And awakening is not an event. It's a process, a return, a rebirth. It's when you start to feel that, even though you're scared, you're ready to show the world who you really are. It's when you understand that the pain that shaped you is also the pain that sets you free. It is when you begin to see that the silence, so ancient, so dense, was just the pause before your blossoming. Your soul knows this. It always has. She never wanted to punish you with silence. She was just waiting for the moment when you were strong enough to listen with love to what you had previously only heard with pain. And that moment is now. Now you feel that there is something inside you that doesn't want to go back, who no longer wants the same spaces, the same relationships, the same imposed silences. Something in you demands authenticity, demands presence. Something in you no longer accepts trading your essence in exchange for superficial acceptance. And that is the beginning of freedom. It is at this point in the journey that you stop waiting to be welcomed and start welcoming yourself. Stop depending on others to be recognized and recognize yourself. Stop begging, listen, and listen to yourself. You become your own lap, your own home, your own cure. And no, this doesn't mean you'll live alone. It means that, now, you will only accept being accompanied by those who have the soul to listen to what emanates from your silence. For those who have the courage to dive where you dive. For those who know that their depth is not a burden, it is a blessing. Because that's what you are. A blessing that has been hidden for so long you almost thought it was a curse. But now, you remember. Remember your strength, of its value, of your light. And if at that moment, something inside you lit up, if you felt that this part of the video was a mirror of your soul, write here in the comments, I am awakening my legend. Write with truth, with courage. She writes for herself, as if sealing a silent pact with her own soul, because your legend will not be written by chance. It will be written by presence. If you've stayed with me this far, it's because your soul didn't just listen, it recognized. It recognized itself between the lines, in the silences, in the truths no one ever had the courage to tell you. And so I invite you to take the next step on this journey with awareness. Subscribe to the channel, not by habit but by decision. Here every silence has a name, and every name a light that awakens. This space is more than videos. It's a refuge for deep souls, a temple for those who feel too much, a home for those who are tired of hiding. If you've made it to the end, leave a like as a silent sign that this message found you. It's your way of saying, I was here. and my soul heard. And now, the next step is before you. Watch the next video that appears on the screen. He is not a continuation by chance. He is part of the same awakening. Your journey is not over yet. She's just getting started.